His face was everywhere. On desks. On shelves. On lanyards clipped to uniforms. Everywhere this man walked inside that hospital, he saw himself staring back, printed on a challenge coin the size of a poker chip, with a giant middle finger on the back. And he couldn't say a word about it, because the coin didn't have his name on it. Not officially. He knew. Everyone knew. But there was nothing he could do. Nothing at all. I was already stateside by the time the full story landed, but when my phone started blowing up with updates, I sat back in my chair and felt something I can only describe as clean. Like the air after a storm. But to understand why that moment felt like justice, we need to go back to Yokosuka, Japan, and a letter that one man never should have written. I spent several years stationed at the Naval Hospital in Yokosuka. If you've never been, Yokosuka is a busy base sitting on the edge of Tokyo Bay, and the hospital there is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. It's not a massive facility. You pass the same faces in the hallway every single day. You know who works hard and who doesn't. You know whose kid just had a birthday. You know who brings leftover food to the break room on Fridays. That closeness builds something. A culture. A bond. Not perfect, nothing in the military is perfect, but real. Honest. Built on shared sacrifice. I was enlisted. I want to be clear about what that means before we go any further, because this story doesn't make any sense without that context. In the military, there are two broad categories of personnel, officers and enlisted. Officers are typically college-educated, they hold commissions, and they lead. Enlisted members are the backbone, the technicians, the medics, the mechanics, the people who actually make everything run. We are not subordinate in dignity. We are not lesser human beings. We are, in many ways, the engine of the entire operation. And the relationship between officers and enlisted, when it works the way it's supposed to, is built on mutual respect. Not blind deference. Respect. I worked in that hospital for years alongside people I still consider family. Corpsmen. Nurses. Admin staff. Radiology technicians. People who showed up every day and did the work without needing applause. When I found out I was being transferred back stateside, it was bittersweet. You get attached to a place like that. You get attached to the people. But I went, settled back into life in the continental US, and kept in touch with the friends I'd left behind. That's how I first heard about him. I'll call him the lieutenant. He was a physician officer, newly arrived in the radiology department at the Yokosuka hospital. A medical doctor with a PhD, which the Navy had paid for. Brand new to the command, brand new to the base, and according to my friends who still worked there, immediately insufferable. The specific word one of my closest friends there used was condescending. Not toward one person. Toward everyone below his rank, which in a hospital staffed heavily by enlisted corpsmen and technicians, was most of the building. She told me he would walk into a room and look through people rather than at them. That he'd give instructions without saying please or thank you, and then act genuinely baffled if someone seemed bothered by it. That he had a way of smiling that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile that says I'm performing politeness, not feeling it. I filed that away. Annoying, I thought. But the military has plenty of officers like that. I figured it was the usual friction of a new personality landing in a tight-knit unit. Some people just take time to adjust. Looking back, I should have known it was something worse. The call that changed everything came from my friend, I'll call her Maya. Maya was one of the enlisted members who worked in housing administration on base. Sharp, funny, completely no-nonsense. She had been stationed in Yokosuka longer than almost anyone she knew, and she had seen every personality type come through that base. She didn't rattle easily. So when she called me sounding genuinely disgusted, I paid attention. You need to see something, she said. I'm sending it to you right now. A few seconds later, a photograph landed in my messages. It was taken on someone's phone, slightly angled, a little blurry at the edges, but perfectly readable. It was a letter. Printed on what looked like standard paper, sitting on a desk in the radiology department. The lieutenant had written it, addressed it to base housing, and then apparently left it sitting out in plain sight long enough for one of the enlisted staff to photograph it and send it around. I read it once. Then I read it again, more slowly, because I genuinely thought I had misunderstood something. I hadn't. Here is what that letter said, in his own words, to the best of my memory and the notes I kept. He stated that he had many valid objections to living in an enlisted housing tower, being an officer. He said that enlisted housing was characterized by, and I want you to hear this carefully, crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism. He said there were sexual assaults and, quote, other perverts in enlisted housing. He then said, and this is the part that made my vision go slightly wide at the edges, that he had a good-looking family. A wife and 2 daughters, ages 3 and 4. And that they were, in his words, prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. He argued that his family should be safe in officer housing, because officers were much more respectable and these deviant activities were, quote, incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. He also wrote that his children needed to make friends with other officer children. That his wife needed to make friends with other officers' wives. That other officer families wouldn't want to visit them if they lived in enlisted housing. And that forcing an officer to live among enlisted was, in his word, unethical. I put my phone down on the table and stared at the wall for a moment. This man had just called every enlisted service member in that housing complex, families included, children included, criminals, perverts, alcoholics, drug addicts. He had called them a danger to his daughters. He had said, in writing, that enlisted people were so inherently deviant that even living near them was a threat to his family's safety. He had written this and sent it to housing, which, as Maya pointed out to me with a kind of exhausted fury, was staffed almost entirely by enlisted members. And here is the detail that truly broke the ceiling off the story. This man had been enlisted himself. He had joined as an Army enlisted soldier before eventually going through officer school and transitioning to the Navy as a commissioned officer. The military even has a term for people who make that journey. They're called Mustangs. Officers who came up from the enlisted ranks. And at their best, Mustangs are some of the finest leaders in the military, because they understand both worlds. They know what it's like to be on the bottom of the rank structure. They carry that knowledge with them and use it to lead with empathy. This man had taken that same journey and used it to become exactly the opposite. He had climbed out of the enlisted world and then turned around and spat on it. He had looked back at the people he used to stand beside and decided they were deviants. Criminals. Threats to his daughters. I sat there for a long moment. Then I called Maya back. How many people have seen this? I asked. It's spreading, she said. People are furious. Like, genuinely furious. Not just venting. Furious. Good, I said. Then let's make sure everyone sees it. Now, here's where I want to be precise about my thinking at the time. I was already processing my separation from the Navy. I was on my way out. I had nothing to lose professionally, and I want to be honest about the fact that that freedom made it easier to act. But I also want to be clear, I was not acting out of personal grudge. I had never met this man. He had not wronged me directly. What he had done was write a document that defamed thousands of people, people I had served beside, people I respected, people who had real families and real lives and real dignity, and he had submitted that document to an official military office. He had put it on paper. He had made it official. This was not gossip. This was not rumor. This was a written record of contempt, in his own words, addressed to his chain of command. I created a new Facebook account. Nothing traceable to me. I found the largest military enlisted community pages I could, and if you've spent any time in military online spaces, you know these groups are enormous. Hundreds of thousands of members. Active duty, veterans, family members. People who had given years of their lives in service, people who understood exactly what it meant to be called a deviant by someone who used to be one of them. I posted the photograph of the letter. I posted his picture alongside it, his official photograph, the kind every officer has on file. I wrote a short, factual caption explaining the context, who he was, where he was stationed, what the letter said, and the fact that he was a former enlisted soldier himself. Then I hit post and went to bed. I woke up to my phone making sounds I had never heard it make before. Notifications stacking so fast the screen couldn't keep up. The post had been shared hundreds of times overnight. By the time I got up and made coffee, it had been shared thousands of times. Comments were pouring in from all over the country. From veterans who had spent decades in the enlisted ranks. From current active duty members who recognized the base, the housing towers, the culture he had insulted. From military spouses who were furious on behalf of the families he had called dangerous. From people who had never served a day but understood immediately what it meant to have your entire category of humanity dismissed as criminal and deviant. Within 48 hours, the story was international. And I wasn't done. I want to tell you about the challenge coins, because I think this is the part of the story that people outside the military might not fully appreciate. Challenge coins are a tradition that goes back generations in the military. They're custom coins, usually about the size of a poker chip, sometimes larger, sometimes shaped differently, and they're used to commemorate units, missions, achievements, moments. People collect them. They display them on their desks, on shelves in their offices, in shadow boxes on their walls. They're a point of pride. A piece of identity. Every military workspace you walk into will have challenge coins somewhere. I am also, as it happens, someone who designs things. It's a hobby that had never particularly served me until this moment. I designed a challenge coin with the lieutenant's face on the front. Official looking. Almost formal. And on the back, a large, unmistakable middle finger. I also designed a set of stickers, because I felt strongly that the enlisted community deserved something to express their solidarity. Something to say, we are not what you called us. We are proud of what we are. The hatchet became part of it, too, and I should explain why. In his letter, the lieutenant had referenced, apparently as evidence of enlisted depravity, an incident involving two gangs attacking each other with hatchets near enlisted housing. I have no idea what specific incident he was referring to or whether it was real, exaggerated, or entirely invented. But the hatchet became the symbol. Enlisted deviants, proud and unrepentant, wielding their hatchets. It was absurd and funny and pointed all at once. The stickers featured it. Some of the coins from other designers did too. The community ran with it completely. Maya was the first person I sold coins to. I gave her a significant discount, the kind of discount that meant she could sell them to people at the base and make a real profit for herself. She deserved it. She was the one who had sent me the photograph. She was the one who worked in that housing office, staffed by enlisted members, who had received this man's contempt in writing. She sold them fast. Within days, coins were sitting on desks throughout the Yokosuka hospital. On the shelves of the radiology department. In the break rooms. In the admin offices. Everywhere the lieutenant walked, he walked past his own face on someone's desk, with a middle finger on the back, and he could not say a single official word about it because the coin bore no name. It was just a coin. A very popular coin. More orders came in from bases stateside. Then from bases in Europe. I moved over 70 coins through Maya alone, and sold more on my own. By the time the dust settled, I had made close to $3,000, which was a genuinely useful amount of money for someone in the process of transitioning out of the military. I want to be transparent about that. I profited from this. I am not embarrassed about it. But here is where the story stopped being mine and became something much larger. The story was picked up by the online naval newspaper. I remember reading that article and feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and vertigo, the sensation of something you set in motion becoming too big to see all of clearly. Then it was picked up by two popular YouTube channels. Then it went further. International press. People in countries with no military connection at all were reading about an American naval officer who had called his enlisted colleagues deviants and criminals and been publicly, comprehensively, and hilariously dismantled for it. And in the military, there is a rule that experienced service members understand deeply: the brass only moves when something gets too big to ignore. When a story is small, it gets buried. When a story is medium-sized, it gets managed quietly. When a story is international news, it becomes impossible. They have to reply. They have no choice. The lieutenant was called to captain's mast. If you're not familiar with military legal proceedings, captain's mast is a non-judicial punishment hearing in the Navy. It sits below a full court-martial but above a simple reprimand. It is serious. It goes on your record. It has consequences. And the lieutenant sat across from his commanding officers and tried, apparently, to explain that his wife had written the letter. Let me say that again, he tried to blame his wife. The woman whose writing style, according to people who had seen samples of both, was noticeably different from his. The woman who then, apparently, tried to step forward and claim responsibility herself, because I think she loved her husband and was trying to protect him, and I feel some sympathy for her in that specific moment even as I feel none for him. But no one believed it. Not the commanding officers. Not the people in that building who had watched him operate for months. The letter was his. The language was his. The worldview was his. And everyone knew it. They both deleted their social media accounts. Completely. Every platform, gone. The UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is the legal framework that governs military conduct. 3 articles were brought against him. 3 separate violations. I won't pretend I know the exact legal details of each charge, but the fact of 3 articles is significant. It is not a warning. It is not a slap on the wrist. It is the beginning of the end of a military career. And here is where the architecture of the military's own rules closed around him like a trap he had built himself. Every officer in the military operates under a promotion timeline. You have a window, a specific period, in which you need to make rank. If you don't promote within that window, you are involuntarily separated. It's called being passed over, and being passed over twice is generally the end of your career. The lieutenant was new. He was already behind the curve in terms of building the kind of record that gets you promoted. And now he had 3 UCMJ articles on his file. You do not get promoted with 3 UCMJ articles. You do not get promoted when your name is attached to an international scandal. You do not get promoted when your commanding officers have just watched you try to blame your wife for your own letter in front of a captain's mast hearing. He was not promoted. He was involuntarily separated from the Navy. But the final piece, the piece that Maya called me specifically to tell me about, months later, her voice carrying something I can only describe as solemn satisfaction, was the PhD. The Navy had paid for his doctorate. That is not unusual. The military invests heavily in the education of its medical officers. But that investment comes with a contract. When the military funds your advanced degree, you owe them 10 years of service. 10 years. If you serve the full decade, the debt is paid in time. If you leave early, for any reason, including involuntary separation, you pay it back in money. A PhD-level medical education. The cost of that degree. Paid back in cash. He lost his position. He lost his career. He lost his rank. He was sent home, but slowly, because military paperwork moves at its own pace, and in the weeks and months it took for his orders to process, he continued to report to the same building where his face sat on coins on people's desks. Where the people he had called deviants continued to do their jobs with professionalism and dignity. Where nobody was required to be warm to him, and almost nobody was. Maya told me that the atmosphere around him in those final weeks was not hostile exactly. It was something quieter than hostility. It was the silence of people who had nothing left to prove and nothing left to say. He had called them criminals. He had put it in writing. And then the world had read it, and the world had decided what it thought of him. The silence wasn't cruel. It was simply honest. I think about that letter sometimes. I think about the specific calculation he must have made when he wrote it, the certainty he must have felt that his words were reasonable, that his concerns were legitimate, that the people he was writing about would never read what he had said about them. He had a PhD. He was an officer. He had, in his mind, arrived somewhere. And from that height, he looked down at the people beneath him and saw deviants. He forgot that deviants can read. He forgot that deviants have phones, and internet connections, and a deep, bone-level understanding of what it means to be dismissed by someone who was supposed to lead them. He forgot that the enlisted members who staffed his housing office were the first people to see his letter, that his contempt landed first on exactly the people he was contemptuous of. He forgot that community is not a function of rank. That loyalty is not a function of title. That the people he called dangerous were the same people who had, for years before he arrived, built something real in that hospital, something that did not require his approval to be worth protecting. And he forgot, perhaps most fatally, that he used to be one of us. I don't know where he is now. I don't know what he's doing or whether the weight of what happened has taught him anything. I hope it has. I genuinely hope that somewhere in the wreckage of that career, there was a moment of real understanding, not just regret at being caught, but actual comprehension of what he had said and who he had said it about. I hope his daughters grow up never knowing their father once called the families in their building criminals. I hope his wife finds her way to something better. But I am not sorry for what I did. I want to be clear about that. I posted a letter that he had already sent to an official military office. I shared words that he had already committed to paper and submitted to the chain of command. I did not fabricate anything. I did not lie about anything. I did not target his family or his children or anyone who had not already chosen to put themselves in the middle of this. I shared his words. That's all. His words, in his handwriting, addressed to his superiors, describing the people he led as deviant criminals. The consequences came from the words. Not from me. I made coins. I made stickers. I made a little money and I helped Maya make a little money, and I watched a community that had been insulted pull together around a hatchet symbol and turn something ugly into something almost funny, because that is what people do when they are strong. They find the absurdity in the cruelty and they make something out of it. They coin it. Literally. 70 coins went out of Yokosuka. More went stateside. Some made it to Europe. His face, with a middle finger, sitting on desks in buildings he would never enter, in countries he would never visit, carried by people who had never met him but understood immediately what he represented. And in the building where he worked, every single day, the same face on the same coins on the same desks. A constant, silent, completely deniable reminder of what he had done. I cannot think of a more fitting architecture for justice. When Maya called me with the final update, the involuntary separation, the UCMJ articles, the PhD repayment, I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee. It was early. The light was just coming in through the window. She told me the whole thing calmly, the way you tell someone the end of a story they already mostly know. And when she finished, neither of us said anything for a moment. Then she said, "The deviants won." And I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and releases something you didn't know you were holding. Because that was exactly right. The deviants won. The people he had dismissed as criminals and alcoholics and perverts had won, not by becoming what he accused them of, but by being exactly what they always were, competent, connected, loyal to each other, and completely unwilling to let someone define them without consequence. I've been out of the military for a while now. Civilian life has its own rhythms, its own politics, its own versions of the same dynamics. I've met people in offices who remind me of him, who have that specific quality of looking through you rather than at you, who see rank or title or salary as a measurement of human worth. They exist everywhere. They are, I think, one of the most common and most quietly damaging kinds of people in any organized structure, because they have just enough authority to make life genuinely hard for the people beneath them, and just enough insulation to believe they'll never face real accountability. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes things get buried. Sometimes the story stays small. But sometimes someone leaves a letter on their desk. And sometimes someone walks past and sees it. And sometimes a photograph travels halfway around the world and lands in the hands of someone who has a little free time, a graphic design hobby, and absolutely nothing to lose. He had a PhD. He had a commission. He had a title and a rank and a letter full of certainty. And he lost everything, to a challenge coin with a middle finger on the back. Now here's what I've been sitting with ever since, and I want to know what you think. Some people might say I went too far. That leaking his letter, even a letter he had officially submitted, crossed a line. That the coins and the stickers were humiliation, not justice. That a man's career and livelihood, whatever his flaws, is too serious a price. But here is my honest position: he submitted that letter to a military office. It was a document, already in the system, already read by the enlisted members who staffed that housing office. I did not break into anything. I did not steal anything. I shared a record of what he had officially said, to the people he had officially said it about. The career consequences came from his chain of command, from UCMJ proceedings, from a captain's mast, from the promotion timeline that the military itself had set. I didn't fire him. I didn't charge him. I didn't write the rules that ended his career. I just made sure his words couldn't be buried. The lieutenant came into the radiology break room on a Tuesday. I know this because Maya called me that same evening, still tightly wound from it, her voice carrying that particular flatness she gets when she is controlling something larger underneath. I wasn't there. But she told me exactly what happened, and I've turned it over in my mind enough times that it lives in me like a memory of my own. He walked in while 3 of the corpsmen were eating lunch. Good people, Maya's colleagues, people who had worked that department for years. One of them, a petty officer named Torres who had 2 kids and coached youth soccer on the weekends, had just gotten back from leave and brought pastries to share. The box was open on the table. It was the kind of small, uncomplicated human gesture that keeps a workplace alive. The lieutenant looked at the box. Then he looked at Torres. Then he said, with the particular lightness of someone who believes they are being charming,
I always find it interesting how enlisted people treat a workplace like a social club. Must be nice not to have real responsibilities.
He poured himself a coffee and left. Maya said the room went completely quiet. Torres didn't say anything. He just looked down at the pastry box and put the lid back on it. My hands went still when she told me that. I was holding a pen and I just stopped. Because that is the specific cruelty of it. Not a shout. Not a slur. A pleasant voice. A rhetorical observation. The kind of thing designed to make you feel foolish for being hurt by it, because surely he was just making conversation. Surely you're being sensitive. But what he had said, translated into plain language, was, you are not serious people. Your kindness is frivolity. Your time is not worth what mine is worth. Torres had 2 kids. Torres coached soccer. Torres had given years to that hospital and brought pastries because he was glad to be back. I thought about that for a long time after I hung up. I called Maya back the following week. I had started moving on the Facebook post by then, and the coins were in progress, and I mostly wanted to check in, but she stopped me before I could get into logistics.
I need to tell you something.
She said.
Something I didn't mention before because I wasn't sure it was my information to share.
I waited. She told me that the housing office had logged the lieutenant's letter. That was normal, any official correspondence went into a file. But what she hadn't told me was that a copy had also been quietly passed up to the senior enlisted advisor at the command. The senior enlisted advisor, the SEA, is the highest-ranking enlisted member at a command, and their specific function is to serve as a direct voice to the commanding officer on matters affecting enlisted personnel. The SEA had read the letter. And according to Maya, who had it from someone who was in the room, he had read it twice, put it down on his desk, and said nothing for almost a full minute.
He didn't bury it.
Maya said.
He kept it. He filed it formally. It's in the system.
I didn't say anything for a moment.
So when this goes public,
I said slowly.
It's already corroborated.
She said.
It's already official. There's no version where he claims it was fabricated or taken out of context. It's in the command's own records. In his own words. Filed.
Something settled in my chest when she said that. Not relief exactly. More like the feeling of ground becoming solid under you after a long time walking on something uncertain. I had been carrying a small background worry that I hadn't let myself look at directly, that when the story spread, there would be room for doubt. That he could say the photograph was altered, or incomplete, or misrepresented. That the story could be managed. It couldn't. It was already in the building. It was already on record. His commanding officers would not be hearing about this for the first time from a Facebook post. They would be looking at something they already had in a file folder, now illuminated by 10,000 shares and an international audience. I thanked Maya and sat with that for a while after we hung up. Then I went back to the coin design and made the middle finger slightly larger. There was a night, somewhere in the middle of all of it, when I sat alone at my kitchen table and almost talked myself out of the whole thing. Not because I thought he was right. I want to be clear about that. But doubt doesn't always come from the right direction. Sometimes it comes dressed as caution. As responsibility. As the voice that says, "Who are you to do this? You're already out. You're already gone. This isn't your fight anymore." I sat there with my laptop open and the post drafted and the coin files ready, and I just stopped. The apartment was quiet. It was late. The kind of late where everything feels more permanent than it actually is. I thought about Torres putting the lid back on the pastry box. I thought about Maya's voice on the phone. Not angry. Exhausted. The specific exhaustion of someone who has been dismissed so many times they've stopped expecting anything different. I thought about all of it. The letter. The language. Prime targets. Deviant activities. Commonplace. He had put those words on paper. He had submitted them officially. He had described people I knew, people with families, with children, with years of service and sacrifice, as inherent threats. As a category. As less than. Short sentences started moving through my head then. The kind that come when something gets simple. He knew us. He used to be us. He chose this anyway. The kids in those towers had nothing to do with his ambition. The corpsman in that break room had nothing to do with his comfort. Torres and his pastries and his soccer coaching had nothing to do with anything except being human in a place where someone had decided that humanity was ranked. I closed the laptop once. Opened it again. Thought about what it means when something gets buried. When a story stays small. When the words stay in a file and the person who wrote them walks the same hallways for years and looks through the same people and nothing ever shows on his face because nothing ever had to. I thought about Maya keeping that job. About Torres showing up the next day. About all the people who would keep showing up, professional and dignified, while a man who called them deviants ordered their coffee and left the room. There are moments when the right thing and the easy thing are the same. This wasn't one of them. This was the right thing and the hard thing and the uncertain thing all at once. But I knew why it mattered. I had always known. I just needed the quiet to hear it clearly. I opened the laptop. I hit post. The lesson I took from all of it is this: people who count on your silence to protect their lies are always shocked when you stop being silent. Was I wrong to do what I did, or did they get exactly what they earned? Let me know in the comments. So I'll ask you directly, was I wrong to do what I did? Or did this man get exactly what he put in writing? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know.